There's always something happening when you follow Celtic FC, and the latest wave of updates brings a mix of highs, frustrations, and a few question marks that fans won't ignore. Let's start by looking beyond club football for a moment, because several familiar faces have been involved in international action, and one name in particular really stood out. Benjamin Negrin had a night to remember representing Sweden, playing a full match in a convincing 3-1 win over Ukraine. It wasn't just about being on the pitch either. He made a genuine impact. His assist for the opening goal was the kind of moment that catches attention, slipping into space down the left before delivering a perfectly weighted ball across goal. It was the sort of contribution that doesn't just help your team win, it builds confidence and puts you firmly in the spotlight. Sweden now edge closer to the World Cup, and from a Celtic perspective, seeing one of their own influence a game at that level is always encouraging. Elsewhere in that same match, there were more familiar figures involved, with a couple of defensive names getting minutes. It meant that, by the end of the game, Sweden had a noticeable Celtic core on the pitch. For supporters, that creates a strange but enjoyable secondary connection during international tournaments, where you suddenly find yourself keeping a close eye on another nation just because of the club links. While Sweden had reason to celebrate, it was a completely different story for Ireland. The match had everything: momentum swings, late drama, and ultimately heartbreak. Ireland looked in control at 2-0, and at that stage it felt like the job was nearly done. But football rarely follows a script. The opposition clawed their way back into it, scoring once, then finding an equalizer late on to force extra time. When it went to penalties, there was still hope, and at one point it looked like Ireland might just see it through. But the final moments didn't go their way, and missing the last 2 spot kicks sealed their fate. No World Cup, and a result that will sting for a while. Wales found themselves in a similar position, suffering their own disappointment after a penalty defeat to Bosnia. It leaves questions about what comes next, especially around leadership and direction. There's still optimism about the future, particularly with a major tournament on home soil not too far away, but for now, it's about dealing with that immediate sense of what might have been. Back on the Celtic front, attention shifts to player fitness, and one of the biggest talking points is Johnston. He's currently away with Canada, although he won't feature in matches during this international break. Instead, his focus has been on recovery, and by all accounts, he's taking a measured approach this time around. That's significant, because earlier in the season, his return from injury came too quickly, and it ultimately led to a more serious setback. This time, there's a clear intention to avoid repeating those mistakes. Johnston himself has spoken about targeting a return closer to the split, but without locking himself into a fixed date. It's a more cautious mindset, one that reflects both the physical and mental challenges of dealing with recurring injuries. For a player whose game relies heavily on pace and intensity, hamstring issues are never straightforward, and even after surgery, there's always a level of risk involved. What stands out is the emphasis on building fitness gradually and possibly getting minutes in a controlled environment before stepping back into competitive action. That kind of preparation could make all the difference, not just in preventing another injury, but in restoring full confidence. Because beyond the physical recovery, there's always that mental hurdle, the hesitation that can creep in after a serious setback. For a player like Johnston, regaining that sharpness without fear will be just as important as any medical milestone. At the same time, the squad situation at right back continues to raise concerns. With Johnston unavailable and uncertainty surrounding other options, it leaves the team slightly exposed in that position. Injuries and knocks have limited choices, and it's one of those areas where depth suddenly becomes a major talking point. Every update is being watched closely, because the availability of even one player could have a significant impact on upcoming matches. Off the pitch, the club has also found itself dealing with disciplinary matters. A recent fine from UEFA followed an incident involving objects being thrown onto the pitch during a European fixture. It led to a short delay in the match and has now resulted in financial consequences. While not unexpected, it adds another layer to ongoing tensions between sections of the support and the club hierarchy. That broader situation remains unresolved, particularly involving the Green Brigade. Communication between both sides seems limited, and there's a growing sense that progress is slow, if it's happening at all. With only a handful of home games remaining, the likelihood of a resolution this season appears slim, which is disappointing given the atmosphere and identity that group brings to match days. As the focus stays on Celtic FC, there's also a growing sense that this period could shape how the squad looks heading into the final stretch of the season. With several players away and others recovering, it creates a strange pause where questions start to build rather than get answered. And one of the biggest concerns right now remains that right-back area, where the lack of clarity is becoming more noticeable with each passing day. There's still uncertainty surrounding the available options, and that's never ideal when fixtures are looming. Injuries have disrupted what would normally be a settled position, and it leaves the coaching staff weighing up alternatives that perhaps weren't expected to be relied upon so heavily at this stage. When one issue leads into another, it quickly becomes less about rotation and more about necessity, and that's exactly the situation developing here. One of the younger options had been expected to step in during this period, but even that has taken a slight twist after he was forced to withdraw from international duty. The incident that led to it raised a few eyebrows, especially given how it happened, and while initial reactions didn't suggest anything too serious, the fact he's pulled out of upcoming matches does introduce a level of concern. At this point in the season, even a minor setback can have a knock-on effect, particularly in a position where depth is already being tested. It leaves the possibility that a more experienced option might be called upon again, someone who has been in and out of the side but is always ready when needed. These are the moments where squad players become vital, not just to fill a gap, but to bring a level of reliability when things are uncertain. And while it may not be the ideal scenario from a tactical point of view, it's part of what defines a season, how a team adapts when things don't go to plan. Beyond the defensive concerns, there's also been a bit of an unusual off-field development involving one of the players currently on international duty. Johnston, already a key talking point due to his recovery, has found himself stepping into a completely different role, taking part in media duties and even appearing as a host on a sports broadcast. It's a reminder of the personality within the squad, and while it's a lighter note compared to injury updates, it still keeps him in the spotlight even when he's not playing. But make no mistake, the main focus for him remains getting back onto the pitch, and everything suggests that approach is being handled with far more care this time. The idea of easing back into action, building up through training, and possibly featuring in a closed-door match before returning to competitive football feels like a sensible progression. It's a shift from urgency to patience, and that could ultimately benefit both the player and the team in the long run. There's also been some reaction to the recent fine handed down by UEFA, which has sparked further discussion around fan behavior and its consequences. While the financial penalty itself might not be the biggest issue for a club of this size, it feeds into a wider narrative that has been bubbling for some time. The relationship between certain sections of the support and the club has been under strain, and moments like this only add more weight to that ongoing situation. The absence of the Green Brigade continues to be felt, not just in terms of atmosphere, but in what it represents. There's a clear disconnect at the moment, and despite conversations happening behind the scenes, there's little sign of a breakthrough. With the season moving towards its decisive phase, the likelihood of seeing that situation resolved anytime soon seems increasingly slim, which adds a layer of frustration to everything else going on. At the same time, there's an awareness that once the international break comes to an end, everything will move quickly again. Players will return, decisions will have to be made, and there won't be much room for hesitation. The squad will need to regroup, refocus, and deal with whatever challenges lie ahead, whether that's managing fitness, adjusting the lineup, or simply maintaining momentum in a title race that leaves no margin for error. And that's really where things stand right now, a mix of optimism around certain performances, concern over injuries, and uncertainty in key areas of the pitch. It's a period that doesn't provide all the answers, but it certainly sets the tone for what's coming next, with every small development carrying that bit more significance as the pressure begins to rise. At the same time, there's a growing curiosity around how Brendan Rodgers is planning to navigate this stretch, because this is where management decisions become just as important as performances on the pitch. When options are limited in certain areas, it forces adjustments not only in personnel, but in approach, and that can subtly change the way the team plays. Whether it's asking a fullback to be more conservative or shifting support across the midfield, these small tweaks can have a big influence over the outcome of matches that are often decided by fine margins. There's also the wider picture to consider, especially with players returning from international duty at different levels of fitness and sharpness. Some will come back full of confidence after positive results. Others might carry disappointment, and a few could return with knocks that weren't there before. It's always a balancing act in these moments, trying to get everyone back into rhythm quickly without overloading them. And that challenge becomes even tougher when the schedule starts to tighten again. What makes this phase particularly interesting is how quickly narratives can shift. A position that looks like a weakness one week can suddenly stabilize if the right player steps in and performs. Equally, a minor concern can turn into a bigger issue if results don't go the right way. That unpredictability is part of what keeps the tension high, because supporters know that every decision, every selection, and every moment on the pitch carries that extra bit of weight now. There's also a sense that certain individuals have an opportunity to step forward and make a statement. When regular starters are unavailable, it opens the door for others to prove their value, not just as backups, but as genuine options moving forward. These spells can define a player's role within the squad, and for some, it could be the difference between being seen as a squad player or someone capable of holding down a starting position when it matters most. And as all of this unfolds, the expectation doesn't change. The demand to win, to perform, and to stay ahead remains constant, regardless of injuries or disruptions. That's the reality of playing for a club like Celtic, where the margin for error is always small and the spotlight never really fades, especially when the season starts edging towards its most decisive moments. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. Shockwaves continue to ripple through Celtic FC as mounting speculation suggests that Martin O'Neill has been relieved of his duties in the wake of an internal scandal involving club staff. While no formal statement has yet confirmed the decision, whispers from within the corridors of Parkhead paint a picture of a club in turmoil, grappling with issues that extend far beyond the touchline. Sources close to the situation hint that tensions had been simmering for some time, with O'Neill reportedly growing increasingly frustrated at the lack of clarity and control surrounding off-field matters. The alleged misconduct involving certain employees is said to have created an atmosphere of unease, ultimately forcing the board into what some insiders describe as a decisive but reluctant move. For many supporters, the potential departure of O'Neill feels both abrupt and unsettling. The experienced manager, long associated with discipline and structure, had been viewed as a steady hand during uncertain spells. Yet, in Scottish football, perception often carries as much weight as performance, and the shadow cast by controversy can be difficult to escape. There is also a growing sense that the decision, if confirmed, may not rest solely on the manager's shoulders. Observers have begun to question whether deeper issues within the club's hierarchy played a role, suggesting that O'Neill may have become a convenient figurehead in a broader attempt to restore order and credibility. Around Glasgow, the rumor mill continues to churn. Names of potential successors are already being quietly floated, though nothing concrete has emerged. What remains clear is that Celtic now finds itself at a crossroads, where swift action must be balanced with long-term stability. Until official word arrives, uncertainty reigns. But if the speculation proves accurate, this episode may well mark one of the more contentious chapters in the club's recent history, leaving fans to ponder not just what comes next, but how things reached this point in the first place. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.